had to go about it, write it out and find it myself.
This is The Final Word, story time with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins, coming to you in the middle of a test match. There's a lot going on, so we're going to get in and get out as quick as we can today, although we've got a bunch of good numbers and good stories to do.
We do, yes. It's always tricky doing a story time app, just purely on the basis that Test cricket tends to be towards the end of the week, and that's when we record this show. And here we are. In my case, it's about to be the third day of the Test match between England and India, which I'm broadcasting on, and of course we're doing the daily shows as well. But yeah, looking forward to telling a few tales, and there's some nice stuff here. Looking forward to it.
Let's get right into it. The fastest start we are ever going to have on this show, our Olympics-inspired beginning, as we play the game called Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. I was allowed to do that because it wasn't too late at night.
I was going to say, what do your new housemates think of that? Will they be slightly weirded out by what's going on?
Maybe. I mean, but, you know, people don't tend to ask too many questions about what's going on in other people's private time, I suppose. It could be any number of things. So Nerd Pledge is a game. It's a reverse quiz. It's played by the people on the Patreon page. This is lovely. They help us make the show by contributing, by sending in an amount of currency. But that amount of currency is not a normal amount. It's a very specific amount because the number relates to cricket in some way, and we have to work out what that number means. For instance, Adam Jones has sent through £6.58. Now, Adam has also sent through a clue, which you don't have to do, but he has done in this case, saying the number is definitely that way around, i.e. 658. If there is one glaring underrepresentation on the show, it's definitely old spinners. This old spinner has 3 famous moments in his career, 2 of which are for batting, and none of them refers to the 658. Thank you, Adam. That's very helpful. 2 of the famous moments were in first-class cricket, and 1 was in a one-day match. So, and the thing with Adam Jones is he finished this clue in all caps saying, "Who can it be?" And so the first thing that I thought was, who can it be now? Which meant that I thought, is this related to Men at Work in some way? Which meant that I spent a long time looking up every musician who has ever been a part of Men at Work, because I thought maybe there's something linking one of them with a name or something. What I did find is that online there's an amazing graph that shows you every member of Men at Work represented by a colourful line over a time scale to show you when they were in the band and when they were out of it and what instruments they played while they were in there. Someone has spent a lot of time on this, and I really appreciate it, even though it had nothing to do with the eventual answer.
It's a fixture of a lot of bands who have been around for a long time. They do that representation on Wikipedia. I remember looking through it with the Buzzcocks a couple of years ago and being kind of staggered by how many people have been in and out of the band, and like those who are in it for a bit, leave for a stretch, come back for a second or third go. So yes, I think the same with The Fall, if you recall correctly, with the way they came together and sort of the consistent members of the band and those who were in for a stretch.
And so I was looking at various things for Adam with the 658 and old spinners, and I was thinking an old spinner related to a 6 is that Robin Marler story about being out second ball stumped for 6 when he was sent in as a night watchman, coming back into the dressing room and saying, "I told you I wasn't a night watchman," which was particularly good. I thought, I mean, a spinner who's a bit older now is Stuart McGill, who had some famous moments with the bat, but he has probably 3 famous moments with the bat because he won a Shield final with the bat, he won a domestic one-day final with the bat, and he had that crazy 200-run partnership with Dom Thornley, so it's probably not going to be him. And so, I left this one to you in the end because I couldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, well, when I first saw it, I thought an old spinner who's known for one thing, and I thought John Embury, but I thought, no, we'll move on from that. It won't be John Embury being known for one. It's known for something to do with the bat. So, look, where we got to in the end is a contemporary of Embury's in some respects, Eddie Hemmings, who a lot of Australian listeners would remember from Ashes tours and all the rest of it. Look, he was an old spinner, given that he was 33 years of age on debut and 42 when he played his final Test match. So there's still hope for us, Jeff. We can still get there. And I suppose in Eddie's case, even at 42, he was young compared to some of the guys we've looked at in recent months. Plenty of gaps in between, though. He only played 16 Test matches across that 9-year stretch, so he was one of these guys who was in and out of the team, which wasn't unusual for England spinners through that stretch of the 80s and into the 90s. So the 3 things that he's famous for, and 2 of them batting aspect of the clue. Well, he made a first-class ton and averaged 18 across 518 matches, to give some context here. But he nearly got a century in a test match. So the fifth test of the 83 Ashes in Sydney, England sort of way behind. He comes in at first drop as the night watchman at the end of day 4. But then he batted for nearly 4 hours to make 95, and England hung on. They were 7 down when the bails were knocked off, and they were able to draw that game in no small part due to the brave and gallant batting of Eddie Hemmings.
I'm sure it was described as gritty. I bet gritty came out.
Yes, well, if you bat for 4 hours and make 95 as the night watcher, you've probably been gritty at different points. Then in one-day cricket, well, he was quite significant in England's 1987 World Cup campaign with the ball, but not so much with the bat. Let's jump forward a couple of years from that, though, to 1989 and the domestic final. It's sort of around that time when, if you had a good domestic final, you'd almost certainly find yourself on a winter tour, as Hemmings did. But let's go to what he did with the bat. Essex, the juggernaut, Notts, the underdog, and the great John Lever has the ball in his hand. 3 to win. And there's Eddie Hemmings out there with bat in hand, but he has a groin strain. He can't run. Has to hit a 4. There's no way they're getting back for a 3 from the last ball. Graham Gooch is the captain.
Probably even a 2 from the last ball.
Exactly. You're not even going to tie it if you knock it out to the outfield. It's 4 or nothing. And Graham Gooch by that stage is the captain of Essex and takes an age changing the field. You can imagine how this would have played out. Overthinking it really. And then it turns out that John Lever bowling the last ball goes block hole, but Hemmings had predicted this and backed away and gave himself just enough room, in I guess the modern style really, to flay him through extra cover to the rope. A famous victory from the final ball of that competition, and the Notts fans went wild. So that's 2 of the 3 hits that he's famous for, both with the bat. What about with the ball though? Well, he's one of very few cricketers in first class cricket to have nabbed all 10 in an innings. But it was kind of like It was kind of like one of these games that, Jeff, we often talk about the smokers and the non-smokers and other games that look a fraction odd. Well, the Air Florida Cricket Festival, which was sponsored by Shell in 1982, doesn't feel like the kind of competition that should have first-class status, but alas, it did. And there's an international 11 and there's a West Indies 11. And the windy side includes, Greenwich, Haynes, Rowe, Lloyd, Dujon, Marshall, Holding, Roberts, Clark. There was obviously a fair bit of money going.
That's a fucking good team.
It's the test team. It's essentially the test team.
That's not a smokers non-smokers team. Like that's a proper thing. Why are they playing the Air Florida Cricket Festival?
Especially in 82. I suppose 82 is just before they catch fire and win everything for about 5 years. But Eddie Hemmings in this game took all of them. 10 for 175, the most expensive 10 for. And statistically freakish in a number of categories, not least the fact that he bowled 49.3 overs out of the 113.3, which means at the other end, 64 overs were sent down without taking a wicket. That's the third sort of standout point of his career.
That's fascinating. But just about anyone who takes a 10 for, it means that they've gone on an absolute tear and they end up taking 10 for 40 or something because they've just ripped out the middle. This is like a guy who's just bowled all day and somehow no one at the other end has picked up a wicket.
Exactly. Exactly. It's kind of like reward for effort more than sort of freakish ability. I mean, it's a lot of.
I'd be fascinated to know how. Like, were they all caught at deep mid wicket, or was he? Did he have a short leg in? Like what? Because it sounds like they went after him.
Well, think of it in these terms: 49.3 overs is the equivalent of a one-day international, nearly 3 balls short of that.
Yeah.
10 for 175. I mean, that's when you apply that to first class cricket, whatever that is, nearly 3.5 and over, whatever it is, nearly 4 and over. That's a pretty sort of decent clip in red ball cricket. So it's not as though he's been outrageously successful through the day. It's just that on 10 different instances he's managed to get a wicket. So an unusual 10 for to say the least. But in addition to the 3 famous moments, what does the 658 mean? So in that order, said Adam in his clue, indicating that it's likely to be bowling figures and emphasising that the wickets come first, as they did when Eddie Hemmings took his best bowling in Test cricket, 6 for 58 at Edgbaston in 1990 against New Zealand. There you go.
That is glorious. If you have fucking nailed that. There is no way that's not right, because there are 4 parts to that and every one of them fits perfectly. I love it. It's old spinners. Thank you, Adam Jones, for kicking us off with the 658. Next on the show is a doubleheader. That is when two people have the same number, but often they have the same number for different reasons. So this is all about the multiplicity of the universe, the way things can go in a million different unexpected ways. Rory Denis and Paul Cherry, the man whose idea it was to put stones in fruit, have both come in with a nerd pledge of $9. 9.00. Now, it's not a Julio pledge. It's definitely a nerd pledge. It definitely means something. 9 is the number. And Paul has got a clue.
He does. Now, Paul has said to us, to steer us, that his nerd pledge goes back to 1884, the days when Aussie cricketers were paid real money for their tours to England. Good to see the egalitarian Aussies took a different approach to the English and their gentleman players divide, which was not as their definitions would imply.
Well, this is very interesting that this came up this week, Paul, because the Australian tour to England in 1884, it was the fourth tour. And we know that Test cricket started in 1877. So they got moving. They had a lot of tours in those early years. And it was interesting when England were talking about not coming for the Ashes over the last couple of weeks that people have cited the boat trip. They said, remember in the old days, they used to do 6 months on the ship. That was real hardship. They knew what sacrifice was. Why did they do it so often? Money, because they got paid a lot of money. Test cricket did not exist as a concept. There was, the Test status stuff is retrospective for all of these games. So nobody's going out in local cricket on a Saturday striving to make a score so they can represent the Australian team. Australia as a country did not exist at that point. It was still a, loosely sort of grouped bunch of colonies that would later be federated. So
you're telling me there was no elite pathway pyramid? You're telling me that they did it for cash. Bugs Bunny. How many sheets am I getting?
They did it for cold, hard cash, because if a group of players called the Australians rocked up to play a match against some of the best cricketers in England, look, there wasn't much to do in 1884. It was like get cholera or watch the cricket. So, that was good, clean entertainment, and people would pay to get in the gate. And the gate was what the Australians were interested in. So they struck a deal, this Australian squad. They were fully professional. There were 13 players in the squad. They were all investors in the squad. They put money in to be able to go on the tour because there was no cricket board. There was no state board backing them or whatever it was. They were funding it, and they made a deal with Lord Harris, which was that they would get half the gate for the outground at any match, which means not the main pavilion but everybody else, and they would get the whole gate for a match against the All England 11 at Lord's. And they played anybody who would play them, right? So they played every county. They played Oxford. They played Cambridge. They played the Gentlemen of England, the Players of England, a North team, a South team. They played fucking Huddersfield, which, as far as I'm aware, is just a bad football team, but apparently it was a cricket team at the time. They played Lord Sheffield's 11, and they played the MCC 3 times, which are the matches that became Test matches retrospectively. And so they got the whole gate for the Lord's Test and half the outground for all of these other matches. And the English press had a go at them for taking the whole gate for the Lord's Test, saying they were mercenaries. Yeah, and the Australian press got very defensive, and you wouldn't imagine anything like that happening now, would you? Some sort of war of words between the media from the two countries. But at the end of it all, what these 13 players took home was estimated to be £900 or 900 as per the nerd pledge that Paul Cherry put in, which roughly today would be worth something like 120,000 quid or 220,000 Australian dollars for the tour. That's why they spent 6 months on the boat, because they got paid $250,000 for doing it.
Well, that's a very strong price signal, shall we say? $250,000 large, whatever it is, $250,000 to
for playing Leicestershire and Huddersfield. I mean,
that's a good racket. What is it? It's not a rort if you read on it. That's what it sounds like to me.
But that's why there were so many brawls in the sort of 20 years or so after that about who got to control the money, who got to control the gate takings, and the players wanted to run it themselves and make the cash themselves, and others were trying to form boards and get in the way. So, that's why partly why Clem Hill punched Peter McAllister and tried to throw him out a window at the selection meeting, because Clem Hill wanted the cash and Peter McAllister wasn't in the Test team and wanted to control the cash. Good times.
All right, so for the second 900, we have an even $9 from Rory. It's a dusty old bastard who was involved in a lot of firsts. That's the clue, and that's right in my swinging arc, Jeff, and we're kind of back to where we were before, really, aren't we? Because if we're looking at cap numbers, which is what I thought we should start with anyway, England cap 9 was the sort of esteemed left-arm spinner, Alfred Shaw. I don't think it's going to be him, though. He's not dusty enough. He was kind of an all-round left-arm bowler at the time. I think he bowled a bit of seam up, a bit of left-arm orthodox. But
he's a bit of a legend. He's not really
Yeah,
dusty.
That's right. You can't call a guy who has the stature that Alfred Shaw has in the game a dusty old bastard. You can, though, Tom Kendall. His opposing number in that first Test match at the MCG in 1877. So the Australian number 9 in that game, thus cap number 9. So he got them the first Test.
He'd be alphabetically 9, wouldn't he? He'd be Tom Kendall.
Yeah, that's right. When I looked at this, I was thinking 9 by virtue of where he came into bat. But you're right, it'll be based on the alphabet, as we learnt via Michael Slater and Brendan Julian, when Michael Slater assumed that he had a higher number than BJ and tattooed himself accordingly to find out later that it's based on surname, not on batting position. But, you know, that's the way it goes. A bit awkward. They did formally change that, by the way. Slater is formally the number above Julian because of what happened in that whole saga back in 1993.
Idiot tax.
Yeah, that's right. They gave them that little latitude there. But no, so the Tom Kendall, let's return to him. So he played in the first Test, instrumental to the win. But he did a few things. First of all, he was the first bowler to dismiss an opposing captain. James Lillywhite leading the English. Well, he got him in the first innings. He wasn't the first captain to fall Lillywhite. That was Dave Gregory, but Gregory was run out. So in terms of the first bowler to get a captain out, that's our man, the left-arm tweaker, Tom Kendall. He was the first bowler to take more than a fifer in a Test. So after 2 other players took 5 in that match, he took 7 for 55 to finish it off. So thus, he's the first player to take more than 5. He was involved in the first stumping, who was the other number 9, Alfred Shaw. He was the first man stumped in Test cricket, and it was Kendall bowling at the time. He was one of the players who played this Test before turning out in any game of first-class cricket, which is another one of these things that jumps out when you look at his record. And he's the first bowler to have an outright hold on the World Championship belt that we've talked about before in terms of who has the most Test wickets. Well, he and Shaw, again, kindred spirits, both took 8 in the first Test, but Kendall took 6 in the second they played in the series. So he had 14 after 2, which had him top of the pops on that measure. So, he wasn't picked to go to England in 1788. And, sort of 2 years after these couple of Test matches, he played 1 game for Victoria. And then he moves to Tasmania for a job working as a typesetter at the Mercury, which really dates him there. 5 years after that, he went with a touring Tasmanian team for 4 games in New Zealand. And then 5 years after that, he played for Tasmania against Victoria back at the MCG, and that's where he started, of course, in that debut Test match in 1877. So all up, 8 first-class games, of which 2 were Test matches, and that must be a record. There can't be anyone else that's played Test cricket, maybe in that era, but certainly not in modern times. He's only played 8 games of first-class cricket, and a quarter of them have been Test matches.
25% of your career is Test matches, and you have not only had he not played a first-class game before that Test, but it takes him like 3 more years to play his first non-Test first-class match, if you will.
Yeah, I suppose there's a tweak on that. Virat Kohli hasn't played a first-class game that wasn't for India or India A for a decade. So Virat Kohli, retrospectively, or later in his career, is doing a version of that, but I suppose that a number of them would have been for India A and not actually Test matches or the Indian 11 when they're on tour. So, and then, he lives in Hobart, Kendall, until 1924 when he passes away. 4 adult kids. Just before his 73rd birthday, he passed away. He had 43 years working at the Mercury. He was described as a man of genial temperament and always ready to take the punishment of his bowling smilingly, which I think's a nice way to sum up our dusty old bastard Tom Kendall.
Beautiful stuff, Tom Kendall. And the sorting beer hat, has spoken and said that via Tom Kendall, Rory Denis gets to give away a slab of Brick Lane beer. We've been talking about the Someday Sours. Let me tell you this. The Someday shines with bright and zingy acidity, balanced with soft and pillowy pale and wheat malts. The blood orange bursts onto the centre stage, delivering layers of flavour and refreshment.
I've said it before, when you finish doing this, you should really go into the voiceover industry. Both you and not only you and Jay Mueller, who runs Bad Producer Productions, does a lot of voiceover work. You two are born for this. You should go to bricklanebrewing.com, by the way, and follow all of the social media accounts that they have, which are all listed in our show notes to get a piece of what they're doing. We should note, by the way, that the slabs of beer can only go to Australia, but anyone who signs up on Patreon has a pretty good chance of being in a position where they can gift a slab somewhere, be it if they're not living in Australia, they can send it to someone who is, and if they are living in Australia, they can have that voucher ultimately come to them and cash in. So we're proud to be in association with the good team at Brick Lane. This is a lot of fun.
All right. Yes, you can give it to yourself. It can be a present to yourself. It can be a present to someone else. And next number is Harley Holcombe. It is $3.42. And I thought for this, we recently talked about Justin Langer making his top score in first-class cricket, which was 342 for Somerset in the middle of 2007, just after he'd retired from Test cricket. So I won't go back to that innings, although it could be it. But I wondered, Adam, if I said someone had made 342 runs in a Test series, you wouldn't be blown away by that, right? You'd say, it's solid.
It's a good, solid effort.
Yeah, solid series. What if that series was only 2 Test matches long?
Yeah, now we're talking.
Who
did this?
What if that series was Sri Lanka's first and only Test series win in England? Because they won the one-off Test in 98, but they never won a Test series per se. One thing cannot be a series mathematically. So 2014, the name Kumar Sangakkara might ring a bell. He's doing some decent work on commentary this week. Playing a very good England team at the time. This was back when Stuart Broad could still bat, when Liam Plunkett was in the side with Chris Jordan, Matt Pryor, like pretty good lower order as far as batting goes. And then Alistair Cook, Ian Bell, Joe Root's there, Moeen still making runs. So this is an England side that can bat, and they rack up 575 declared. And Sri Lanka's in some trouble. And then Kumar comes in. He makes 147. Angelo Matthews makes 102, bats through with the tail, gets them past 450. England bang on a couple of hundred more and set close to 400. And then Kumar Sangakkara top scores again with 61. Again, Matthews is the second last out, and the last pair hang on. They're 9 wickets down, and they hang on to draw.
Yeah, I was there. I bought one of the 20 quid tickets on day 5. I wasn't living in the UK at the time. I was over for, I don't really know why I was over in the UK. Probably to play cricket. It was just after I'd left politics. Yeah, it would have been 2014, and I was working in a different job briefly, and thought I'll take some leave and muck around and play some cricket for a bit, and rocked up at Lord's with one of the 20 quid tickets they sell on the gate for day 5 when a Test goes the full distance, and watched that thrilling finish, which they hung on. I think the penultimate wicket fell with 3 balls to go or something like that with Matthews, and
maybe a bit more than that, because the 10 and the 11 both faced 5 or 6 deliveries, I think.
So right, okay. In my mind, I thought the 11 had like a couple of balls to face. Maybe it was a couple of overs to face. I may have had a couple of beers on the way through. I can't recall, but that sort of stands to reason if I was on holiday. So, but they got the job done.
They got the job done, and then it inverted in the other Test, because in the second Test, Sangakkara top scores again, 79 out of 257. England still get a lead over 100. Sangakkara makes another 55, Matthews makes another ton, and they get 350 in front. They set a target, and they're trying to bowl England out, and they get all the way down to the last pair. And James Anderson's out there, faces 55 balls without scoring, and in the very last over of the day, he gets out. He's trying to do the same thing as Sri Lanka did, and he couldn't quite get there.
That's right.
They win 1-0. It's a series win that wouldn't have happened without Kumar Sangakkara. He made 147, 61, 79 and 55 in 4 hits. 342 are the best, and a historic win.
All right, Jeff, next up, 497, Colin Burton. Now, the clue, cricket is all about fruit. Now, Jeff, yes, fruit, peaches, cherries, I sort of see, I kind of feel that might be where he's going. But equally, speaking of, fruit is what our old mate Jim Maxwell calls poor bowling, buffet bowling. There's some buffet bowling out there at the moment. You help yourself stuff. Or he might go, oh, that's just fruit. That's fruit.
Bowling. He was bowling absolute fruit.
Bowling absolute fruit. So I thought maybe we'll go there for a minute, shall we? So when was there a game where fruit was bowled and 497 runs were scored? Well, that would be a T20 played between Otago and Central Districts in the year 2016.
Oh, thank God. Thank God you're taking me there. It's I never know where we'll go sometimes, but you're taking me to a special place. Let's do it.
We talked about Ken Rutherford a couple of months ago when he had a big night on the tiles at the Scarborough Festival and ended up making a triple ton the next day. Well, his son Hamish in this game may have done the same. He might have made 106 from 50 balls. A Targo in 20 overs, 249 for 3, if you don't mind umpire. And then, in reply, for Central Districts, a bloke by the name of Mihaela Jayawardena was playing domestic T20s in New Zealand in 2016, the year after he retired.
When was he doing that? When was he doing this? Why was he doing this? He was on TV commentary in England that year. Why would you do this, Mihaela? Anyway, he did it. And in response to 249, there he is. He goes and bludgeons 116 of the best from 56 balls. Tom Bruce has gone completely mad with 61 from 29. Neil Wagner Tom Bruce has gone mad. Tom Bruce has gone mad.
Tom Bruce has gone completely mad. And then we had one of those Ken Bruce stores in Endeavour Hills Shopping Centre where I grew up.
Yeah,
and it was a place my brother and I had a lot of fun running around like idiots when we were kids. Neil Wagner had 8 runs to defend, and he did it. He took a wicket from the final ball. They won by 1 run. Central's finishing on 248 for 4. Imagine twatting 248 and losing. Anyway, they did. That means the aggregate runs for the day, that was 497 of them, just 7 wickets, and it still remains the highest T20 score in any sort of professional league. I'm not sure if that counts for the Road Safety Retirement League or the sort of, or whatever the latest...
Air Florida T20 competition.
The Air Florida
T20
League. Yeah, I reckon if there was an Air Florida Shell League these days, it'd be rife for match fixing. But anyway, so yeah, that's the story of the day that Hamish Rutherford and Mihaela Jayawardena and Tom Bruce has gone completely mad, made 497 between them.
But I want to know what led Mihaela Jayawardena to be playing for Central Districts in T20 cricket.
Yeah, well, this prompted me to go on a bit of a dive because I knew that Mihaela was a little bit of a journeyman when it came to this kind of thing. Who did he play T20s for? Well, much like Dirk Nannis, fucking everybody. Adelaide Strikers, he played 7 games for them, 13 games for the mighty Central Districts, 33 times for Delhi Daredevils, twice for the Dhaka Dynamites, 9 times for the Jamaica Talawars, once for the Karachi Kings, mustn't have worked out that well, 36 times for Kings 11 Punjab, 13 times for Kochi Tuskers Kerala. I don't think they lasted long in the IPL. I think, isn't Brad Hodge still chasing money from them or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think he is. I reckon Mihaela played every game they played if he played 13 for them.
Twice for the MCC, twice for Sinhalese Sports Club, 10 times for Somerset, 55 times for Sri Lanka, which of course count as list day games, 8 times for Sussex, 3 times for Trinidad Tobago Red Steel, twice for Euthera. Where's Euthera?
It sounds like a place you get an infection.
I was going to say, I mean, you've changed one letter and it's a place you need to get checked out from time to time when you're a younger lad. 20 times for Waiamba, and then Waiamba United as well. He got a game in as well. So all told, I didn't even count how many there are. Lots.
That must have been a real sort of controversial moment when he crossed town from Waiamba to Waiamba United. I imagine that's a real grudge match situation there. That was like Ron Barassi leaving Melbourne when Mihaela went to Waiamba United. Must have been. I
remember when Barassi left, he got death threats, didn't he? When he moved to Carlton. It's all kind of wrapped up in the end of the Norm Smith story at Melbourne. Anyway, so 497, Colin Burton. Let us know if we're anywhere close to the mark. Fruit being the sort of bowling that must have been on show that day. And if we're not, we'll revisit it next week. 269, Jeff, is our next number from Simon Trafford, where the test match is being played this week at Trent Bridge, his home ground. His clue, it's a new pledge set which fits perfectly in all our special interests.
So I thought there was a certain breadth to this, and I messaged Simon and said, if you're talking about all of our special interests, do you have a clue that he's bringing together Glenn Maxwell, old spinners, automation of the front foot no ball rule, Indian royal family, and running out the non-striker? Is this all of these things? And Simon said, not all of them, but think about the spinners and think about where I'm from. So spinners who are ancient from Nottinghamshire or who played for Nottinghamshire.
Didn't we do this like half an hour ago?
Yeah, we did. And 269 is the number. And coincidentally, Eddie Hemmings faced 269 balls in Test cricket in 1982.
There it is.
But I don't think it's that. It's pretty close to Graham Swan's Test wickets too, which was 255. But we're going to go somewhere else, and this is into a lot of things that we like, because Tom Richmond is the name of this old spinner. One, dusty old bastard, in that he played one Test match in 1921. Two, had a very long first-class career, 20-odd years for Notts, taking 1,121 wickets along the way. Three, short, fat leg spinner. Like,
best kind. The
can't
best kind.
beat it. Four, his nickname was Titch.
Oh,
Titch Richmond. There was another one. So
another Titch small leg spinner.
While Titch Freeman, short fat leg spinner, was going around at Kent, Titch Richmond was going around at Notts in the same year.
Surely. One's been named after the other, right? Like in
You
the
would have
way
thought
that
so.
you get a footballer who reminds you of another footballer, and you give them that nickname.
Right.
I can see it.
Yeah, or the Alfie Langer, Gary Lyon kind of operation. But Titch was short and fat and doing his business for 1,000+ wickets. The Test match that he played, though, the first Ashes Test of 1921, the historic series in which Warwick Armstrong's team completely dominates England. He's playing in the team with final word faves Wilfred Rhodes, Percy Holmes, and Johnny Won't Hit Today Douglas, who've all had a lot of airtime on this show. And he's up against Warwick Armstrong's Australia, the big ship, one of Gideon Haig's excellent books, if you're in for a read. And this is the series where Warwick Armstrong first unleashes the power of a fast bowling opening pair, which just hadn't been done. Everybody was a slow left armer apparently in the 1800s. But Warwick Armstrong has Ted McDonald and he has Jack Gregory, and he puts them together and they absolutely scare the shit out of England. They bowl them out for 112 on the first day, 147 in the second innings, and dominate them. And I wrote this piece on the Ashes a few years ago where I found these bits from Neville Cardus about these two bowlers, and this is I thought I'd drop these in. So that Neville Cardus on Ted McDonald, he says, "I cannot find language yet to describe the awe-inspiring and mingled speed, power and effortlessness of his attack. Rhythmic, tawny, aquiline, the silent curving run of McDonald, stumps flying like spears. It was bowling of havoc but also of rare beauty. It was bowling which seemed to become ignited from the burning sun above." It's a pretty good rap on your bowling.
It's a great quote. Whenever I hear Neville Cardus, I think of Neville on the Chopper film. Neville.
Not quite
I hear you want to give me some money.
Subs. Merv Hughes. Where are the subs? And then Cardus, writing about Jack Gregory, says it describes him as a giant of superb physique who ran some 20 yards to release the ball with a high step at a gallop. Then at the moment of delivery, a huge leap, a great wave of energy, breaking at the crest and a follow through nearly to the batsman's doorstep. And there's also this line from Bradman where he describes Gregory's bowling as positively violent in its intensity. So this is what England are up against.
I wonder how quickly he actually bowled. I mean,
122.
Yeah, I was going to, I don't want to disparage those that came before us, but we know from like, let's use the Olympics again, the way that records tumble and the percentages in which they do. And we know, we've all seen the way that cricket's progressed in the last 30 or 40 years in terms of speed, with some outliers. Maybe he was such an outlier that it would be comparable to modern pace. But it also might have been like 118, 114 clicks. I don't know.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. But it probably feels a lot faster if you don't have protective equipment on.
That's true, of course. On an uncovered pitch with no protective equipment, of course, yes.
Yep. So nonetheless, basically England smashed them up, which means that poor old Titch Richmond only gets to bowl in one innings of the match. He did all right. He got out Herbie Collins and he got out Jack Gregory, who also batted six and, made Test hundreds, could really bat in also with violent intensity. And in true English fashion, having been absolutely flogged by an innings, they drop a bowler. So that was it for Titch Richmond, who would go on to play 11 more years for Notts, but left Test cricket with figures in his only innings of 2 for 69, which was the Nerd Pledge number of Simon Trafford, 269. And a final little note on that, you may remember we had Eddie Hemmings with 6 for 58 earlier in the episode. On that first day at Trent Bridge, Jack Gregory took 6 for 58.
Oh, Jeff, don't you love it when it all comes together so nicely at the end of an episode? Which is what this will be, actually. It's a truncated version of story time this week on the basis that we don't quite have the time we normally do, as we mentioned off the top. But I'm glad we were able to get in there. Well, a strong theme of dusty old bastards, old spinners, and a lot of Eddie Hemmings along the way.
So much Eddie Hemmings. Yeah, it was like, if this were a Pavlova, Eddie Hemmings was the strawberries just distributed liberally across the top. We've got a stack of revisits that we'll come back to on next weekend's story time when we'll plough into the new numbers once again. If you want to send us a nerd pledge, very easy to do, patreon.com/thefinalword. You'll help us keep making the show, and you might very well win the chance to give away a slab. You've got roughly a 2 in 7 or 8 chance, so that's pretty good. That's like the percentage of Tom Kendall's first class career being test matches. Those are the sort of odds that you've got. This has been The Final Word Story Time. Jeff Lemon, Adam Collins. We'll be back for the weekly show next week, and we're doing the dailies about the India-England Test Series with a 10-15 minute grab every day. So we'll see you on the feed.
Have a nice weekend.
I had to go.